Just now, Trump demands Starmer resign. Britain's response left the White House in silence. At 10:47 this morning Eastern Time, inside a restricted call placed from the Oval Office private study, something happened that has no parallel in the 78-year history of the Anglo-American special relationship. Donald Trump, in a phone call that lasted exactly 19 minutes and 43 seconds, according to 4 sources with direct knowledge of the conversation, demanded that British Prime Minister Keir Starmer resign from office. Not suggested, not implied, not framed as advice, demanded. And what happened next in London, in Brussels, and inside NATO headquarters in the following 7 hours represents the single most consequential rupture in the US-UK alliance since the Suez Crisis of 1956. I need you to understand the gravity of what I am about to walk you through, because what unfolded today is not a diplomatic spat. It is not a news cycle controversy that fades by the weekend. What you are watching in real time is a sitting American president using the most powerful office in the world to attempt to remove the democratically elected leader of America's oldest and closest ally. And the British response, measured, deliberate, and absolutely devastating in its implications, has left Washington with no clean exit from what multiple foreign policy officials are already calling the worst self-inflicted wound in the history of American soft power. I'm Ann Applebum. I have spent my career documenting what happens when democratic systems come under pressure from forces that do not respect their boundaries. And I can tell you, without any equivocation, that what happened today crosses every line I have studied, written about, and warned about for decades. If you care about the survival of the institutions that have kept democratic nations from destroying each other since 1945, subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications, because the next 72 hours will determine whether this moment becomes an inflection point or a precedent. And those are very different outcomes. Here is what we know. 4 independent sources, 1 senior official inside the National Security Council, 1 person directly briefed by the British ambassador to Washington, and 2 individuals with direct knowledge of communications between the State Department and the British Foreign Office have confirmed to us the sequence of events that began this morning at 10:31 a.m. Eastern Time. The call was not on any scheduled diplomatic calendar. It was not prepared by either country's foreign ministry. According to the official summary transmitted to my source less than 5 hours ago, Trump opened the call by stating that Prime Minister Starmer's decision last week to sign the London Framework, a European security arrangement committing British forces to a Ukraine stabilization mission organized independently of American military command, represented, and I am quoting directly from notes taken by a senior aide monitoring the call, a betrayal of everything the special relationship stands for. Within the first 4 minutes, according to all 4 sources, the conversation became what one described as extraordinarily hostile. Trump told Starmer, and this is taken directly from notes reviewed by my source, that if Starmer did not resign within 48 hours and allow leadership in London, that would, quote, put the US-UK relationship first, the United States would suspend all intelligence sharing with the United Kingdom under the Five Eyes Agreement, impose tariffs on British financial services exports, and begin, quote, rethinking whether Britain deserves its seat at the table. Let me make sure you grasp the scale of what Trump threatened. The Five Eyes intelligence sharing arrangement is the most sensitive and consequential security partnership on the planet. It is the backbone of Western counterterrorism, cyber defense, and nuclear deterrence coordination. Suspending it would not just damage Britain, it would shatter the confidence of every democratic ally watching from Tokyo to Toronto to Berlin. Now, here is exactly how we got to this moment, because this did not happen without a trail of decisions, provocations, and escalations, and every one of them was documented. Thursday, February 19th, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, standing alongside French President Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz at a joint press conference in Paris, announced the finalization of the London Framework, a multilateral European security agreement that commits British, French, German, and Polish forces to a Ukraine stabilization and reconstruction mission. Critically, the framework was designed and negotiated entirely outside of American involvement. Starmer stated explicitly that the agreement reflects Europe's responsibility to lead in its own backyard and to build security architecture that endures beyond the political cycles of any single nation. The statement was widely interpreted by foreign policy analysts as a direct and deliberate signal that Europe was preparing for a post-American security landscape. Saturday, February 21st, Trump posted on Truth Social at 5:52 a.m. a message that Washington observers initially categorized as a typical grievance, but which in retrospect was the first formal escalation. The post read, "Keir Starmer has chosen Europe over America. He signed a secret military deal that cuts the United States out completely. Disgraceful. After everything we've done for Britain, this is how they say thank you." Many people are asking whether Starmer even represents British interests anymore or European bureaucrats. Sad. The post was shared 1.2 million times in under 8 hours. Conservative media in both the United States and parts of the British press amplified the claim that Starmer had betrayed the transatlantic relationship. Monday, February 23rd, at a White House Rose Garden event, Trump, departing from prepared remarks, looked directly into the cameras and said, "Starmer made a big mistake, a very big, very disrespectful mistake. The British people are great people, but their leader chose Brussels over Washington. We'll see how that works out for him." Senior British diplomatic sources in Washington immediately flagged the statement to London as a potential precursor to formal action. That was 6 days ago. Wednesday, February 25th, Trump convened what 3 sources describe as an options meeting in the Roosevelt Room with his national security advisor, his trade representatives, and the director of national intelligence. According to one participant briefed immediately after the meeting, Trump asked repeatedly, "What is the thing Britain cannot replace, and how fast can we pull it?" The answer that received the most attention from the president, according to my source, was the Five Eyes intelligence pipeline. Trump reportedly said, "Then that's the lever," which brings us to this morning at 10:47 when Trump picked up the phone and a demand replaced a suggestion. Now, let me tell you exactly who Keir Starmer is, because this is not a peripheral figure or a weak-handed leader looking for compromise. Starmer served as Director of Public Prosecutions for England and Wales from 2008 to 2013, overseeing some of the most significant criminal prosecution decisions in British legal history. He was knighted for his service. He rebuilt the Labour Party from its worst electoral collapse in nearly a century, leading it to its largest parliamentary majority since 1997. He holds a law degree from the University of Leeds and a postgraduate degree from Oxford. His governing philosophy is built on institutional stability, multilateral engagement, and what he describes as disciplined internationalism. He does not flinch. And the British political system, forged over 800 years from Magna Carta through parliamentary sovereignty, has no cultural or constitutional mechanism for responding to the demand of a foreign leader with anything other than categorical refusal. If you're finding this analysis valuable, hit that like button right now. This story is about to become significantly more complicated, and every like tells the algorithm that this content matters and helps push it to the people who need to understand what is happening to the democratic order in real time. Here is what happened at 2:14 p.m. Eastern Time inside the British Foreign Office in London. Foreign Secretary David Lammy, accompanied by the Cabinet Secretary and the Chief of the Defense Staff, convened an emergency meeting of the National Security Council. The meeting lasted 58 minutes. According to a source briefed on the meeting within 90 minutes of its conclusion, there was no debate about whether to comply with Trump's demand. The debate was entirely about the language and sequencing of the response. The decision reached was unanimous, and in the words of my source, made with complete clarity. At 3:41 p.m. London time, 10:41 a.m. Eastern, Prime Minister Starmer delivered a statement from 10 Downing Street that was carried live on BBC, Sky News, ITV, and streamed internationally. I want you to hear what he said, because these words are now being studied in every foreign ministry in the democratic world. Starmer said, "I received a telephone call this morning from President Trump. I will not detail the private contents of that call, but I will say this clearly and without qualification. The government of the United Kingdom is formed by, accountable to, and serves the British people. No external pressure, no matter its origin, alters that constitutional reality. Britain signed the London Framework because European security is British security. We did so in full alignment with our values and our national interest. We will not be reversing that decision, and we will not be conducting our foreign policy in response to ultimatums." The House of Commons erupted. Members from across every party, Labour, Conservative, Liberal Democrat, Scottish National Party, rose to applaud. The leader of the Conservative opposition, the party that has historically maintained the closest alignment with Republican administrations in Washington, issued a statement within 22 minutes that read, "On matters of British sovereignty and democratic governance, this House speaks with one voice." The Prime Minister has our full support. But wait, there is something I have not told you yet, and it is worse. At 4:17 p.m. London time, the European Commission President issued a formal statement from Brussels confirming that the European Union views any attempt by a foreign power to interfere in the democratic governance of a member state or close partner as a matter of collective European concern. The statement did not name Trump directly. It did not need to. Every sentence was a response to exactly what had occurred. At 5:03 p.m., Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney, himself the target of a similar Trump demand just days ago, issued a statement of solidarity with the United Kingdom, describing Trump's reported demand as part of a pattern that democratic nations must name clearly and confront collectively. At 5:49 p.m., the German Foreign Ministry released a 4-line statement reaffirming Germany's unconditional support for British sovereignty and calling on all democratic nations to uphold the principle that governments are chosen by citizens, not by foreign executives. What you are watching is not a collection of individual diplomatic responses. You are watching the democratic world in real time begin to organize around a shared recognition that American presidential power has become something that allies must defend against, not merely manage around. I have covered democratic backsliding across Eastern Europe, the collapse of rule of law norms in Hungary and Poland, the erosion of judicial independence in Turkey. I am Ann Applebum. This is what I do, and I will tell you directly, the pattern I am watching unfold today bears structural similarities to the early phases of those processes, except this time, the power making the demand is not Budapest or Warsaw. It is Washington. Subscribe right now. Not because I am asking for engagement metrics. Subscribe because when the Five Eyes Emergency Review convenes, when NATO schedules its extraordinary session, when this gets raised at the United Nations Security Council, you will want to be here for the analysis before the spin cycle buries the substance. Now, let me give you the 3 scenarios that are sitting on the table in the next 48 hours. Scenario 1, Trump retreats. Probability 20%. Faced with unified British political opposition, a cold and immediate European response, and, critically, pressure from American defense and intelligence community leaders who understand what suspending Five Eyes actually means operationally, Trump issues a face-saving statement. The White House claims the call was mischaracterized. Starmer remains in office. The London framework proceeds. But even in this best-case outcome, every Democratic ally on earth has now received confirmation that the American president believes he has the authority to demand their resignation. That knowledge does not disappear. The trust does not return. And the psychological recalibration of every allied government's relationship with Washington begins immediately and permanently. Scenario 2, intelligence warfare. Probability 45%. Trump proceeds with partial suspension of Five Eyes intelligence sharing as a pressure mechanism. The United Kingdom, rather than folding, immediately begins channeling intelligence cooperation through European partners instead, effectively accelerating the exact independent European security architecture Trump was trying to stop. American defense officials begin warning Congress that the operational consequences are catastrophic, that counterterrorism operations across 3 continents depend on British intelligence pipelines that cannot simply be rerouted. Republican senators with Defense Committee seats begin receiving calls from intelligence community professionals using language that is not political. The crisis ends eventually in a grudging restoration of intelligence sharing, but with the relationship permanently reoriented. Britain never fully trusts Washington again, and the Five Eyes alliance begins a slow structural transformation away from American centrality. Scenario 3, alliance restructuring. Probability 35%. This is the scenario that should concern every serious analyst of democratic institutions. Britain does not back down. Trump does not back down. Intelligence sharing is formally suspended. Britain immediately invokes Article 4 consultations within NATO, not Article 5, but Article 4, meaning it has formally notified the alliance that its security interests are under threat. The question of whether that threat is external or internal to the alliance is deliberately left ambiguous. An emergency NATO Council session is convened in Brussels. The fundamental question now on the table, whether an alliance can function when its most powerful member uses intelligence coercion against fellow members, cannot be answered without confronting the deeper question of whether American leadership of the democratic world retains any legitimacy at all. The fracture that follows is not dramatic or immediate. It is incremental and irreversible. American leadership of the democratic world erodes not through military defeat, but through moral delegitimization, ally by ally, institution by institution, crisis by crisis. Former U.S. Ambassador to the United Kingdom, Louis Sussman, who served under 3 administrations, told the BBC this afternoon something that every American should hear. He said, "In 35 years of studying the transatlantic relationship, I have never witnessed anything that even approximates a sitting American president demanding the resignation of Britain's prime minister. This is not a diplomatic disagreement. This is an assault on the foundational premise of allied democracy. If this is allowed to stand without consequence, we will look back on today as the day the special relationship ended." Professor Samantha Besson of the University of Oxford, one of Europe's foremost authorities on international law and democratic sovereignty, stated in a written analysis published this evening that Trump's demand constitutes what she calls coercive democratic interference, the use of asymmetric power to override the electoral mandate of an allied nation. She stated that if the United States proceeds with intelligence suspension against Britain for refusing to comply with this demand, it will represent the first formally documented case in modern history of one democratic nation weaponizing intelligence partnerships against another democracy's constitutional independence. Here is what I am watching in the next 48 hours that will determine how this story ends. First, whether Trump signs any executive action targeting British financial services or initiates the formal intelligence suspension process. Sources inside the Treasury Department indicate that a draft order has already been prepared imposing 40% tariffs on British financial services exports, a sector representing $94 billion in annual trade and employing 2.3 million people. If that order is signed, Britain's chancellor has already briefed the cabinet on reciprocal measures targeting American technology company operations in the United Kingdom. Second, whether European governments move from statements to formal coordination. If France and Germany convene an emergency European Council session specifically to address American interference in allied democratic governance, that meeting will produce binding language that permanently redefines the EU's posture toward Washington in ways that cannot be walked back. Third, whether the NATO Secretary General issues any statement that even implicitly acknowledges the internal dimension of Britain's Article 4 consultation. If he does, it will be the first time in NATO's 76-year history that the alliance has formally acknowledged a potential security threat originating from within its own membership. Let me bring this together because the clock is moving faster than the analysis can keep pace with. What happened today is not about Keir Starmer. It is not about the London framework. It is not even specifically about Britain. What happened today is the clearest statement yet of a governing doctrine that holds that American presidential preference supersedes the democratic choices of allied nations, that foreign elections produce outcomes subject to American veto, and that the tools of American power, intelligence, trade, military, can and will be deployed against democratic allies who refuse to subordinate their sovereignty to Washington's demands. Here is what you can actually do. Contact your senators and representatives, especially if you live in a state with significant defense industry, financial services, or intelligence community employment. Tell them that using Five Eyes as a coercion instrument against Britain is operationally reckless, diplomatically catastrophic, and constitutionally questionable, and that Congress has the authority and the obligation to intervene. Share this video, not for the algorithm, but because most Americans have no idea this crisis is unfolding, and because the mainstream media, when it eventually covers it, will treat it as a controversy rather than a constitutional stress test on the entire architecture of allied democracy. And watch how other Democratic leaders respond in the next 24 hours. Their silence or their solidarity will tell you everything you need to know about whether the institutions built after 1945 have the structural resilience to survive what is being done to them right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because when the NATO emergency session convenes, when Britain's Article 4 consultation produces its formal response, when the intelligence community's internal assessment of the damage reaches the congressional oversight committees, I will be the first to bring you the full breakdown before the spin machine has had a chance to bury what it means. What is happening right now is not normal. It is not routine. It is not a disagreement between allies that gets smoothed over at the next summit. What is happening right now is a test of whether democratic sovereignty is real or whether it is conditional on American approval. And the answer that comes out of London in the next 48 hours and the answer that comes out of Washington in response will define the shape of the international order for the next generation. Drop a comment below right now. Do you think Britain holds firm, or does the economic and intelligence pressure eventually force a compromise? Which of the three scenarios do you think is most likely, and why? I am Ann Applebum, and I read every single comment because what you are seeing in your communities, what you are hearing from people around you, matters to how I understand this story. Are people paying attention to what is happening, or is the significance of this moment being lost in the noise? What angle am I missing? What are you seeing that I am not? This is the moment when we find out if the democratic world still has the will to defend itself. The next 72 hours will tell us everything.